Hi, this is Rich Carlson. Welcome to another episode of the Art of Rope Work here at Canyons and Crags. This is an overhand knot. It's easy to tie, either rethreaded going around an object such as an anchor, or we could tie it small on a bight to insert a carabiner or a rappel ring. Anytime you tie an overhand knot, you want to make sure you load it on its major axis. So if I tied it like this, what I'm probably trying to do is put this around an anchor and load this long strand. This is also an overhand, but it isn't an overhand knot. It is an overhand bend. The application for a bend is when I want to tie a loop around an object and load it in this direction, again on the major axis of the bend, or I just want to take two ends and splice them together. It makes a big difference in the strength. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of when a bend is more appropriate and when a knot is more appropriate. So, grab your gear and a rope and follow along. Here's an example of the appropriate use of an overhand knot. Webbing tied around an anchor to load a single strand. It is loaded correctly on the major axis of the knot. Here's another example of the appropriate use of an overhand knot. This time tied on a bight at the end of the webbing for a rappel ring or a carabiner. Again, it is correctly loaded on the major axis of the knot. Here's an example of improper use of an overhand knot. This kind of overhand knot, tied with the two tails coming out the same side, is called a flat overhand. This is a situation when an overhand bend is the correct choice. Notice how the bend is loaded correctly along the major axis. Now there is a point of confusion. The overhand bend as pictured here is commonly referred to as a water knot. This is an unfortunate tag because it functions as a bend. It is also referred to as a ring bend, which is a more accurately descriptive name. But an overhand is an overhand is an overhand, right? Well, when you tie an overhand knot or bend in webbing and load it correctly along the major axis, the webbing strength is reduced by around 35%. Webbing that will hold 4,000 pounds will likely break at the knot at around 2,600 pounds. When you tie an overhand in webbing and load it incorrectly as shown here, you reduce the webbing strength at the knot by more than 70%. Plus, you introduce a second potential failure mechanism. Because you are pulling the knot apart, it can roll toward and off the ends of the tails. I conducted a couple pull tests for comparison using a Rock Exotic Enforcer to measure force. For the first test, I tied an overhand bend. As expected, it broke at right around 2,600 pounds. Also note, I tied the bend with 4.5 inch tails. The tails were 4.25 inches after the failure. 1/4 inch was lost due to tightening. For the second test, I tied a flat overhand. The knot began to fail at 1,178 pounds, less than 30% of the webbing's rated strength. That's a strength loss of more than 70%. Just like the first test, I tied the knot with 4.5 inch tails. The knot rolled during the pull test, reducing the tails to just 2 inches. I was actually expecting the knot to roll to failure. I was surprised that the strength was reduced as much as it was. Regardless, the two failure mechanisms are unacceptable and unnecessary considering it only takes a few seconds to tie correctly and keep the load on the major axis. It makes sense to teach rules about how to do things in the early part of someone's learning curve, but somewhere along the way everyone needs to develop the ability to discern for themselves. So let's consider some thought processes. If you use a flat overhand to splice together two pieces of webbing, you are introducing two potential failure mechanisms. Why would you do that? It only takes a few more seconds to tie a bend. If you are my partner, I will initiate a two-step process. The first step will involve bitch slapping. The second step will be me untying the flat overhand and tying a bend. In this photo, the load will be supported by 2 strands of webbing, one on each side of the tree. The strand with no knot will hold 4,000 pounds. The strand with the flat overhand will hold less than 1,200 pounds. If you are my partner, I will initiate the same 2-step process: bitch slapping, then retying. In this photo, the flat overhand was moved to the back of the tree. I expect you to try to justify the flat overhand as being quick, and because you moved it to the back of the tree, friction will hold some of the load, so it won't all be held by the flat overhand. In the time it took for you to justify what you did, you could have tied a bend instead. When you are finished talking, I will initiate the 2-step process. There is one application where I would accept a flat overhand used in place of a bend. That is in Wrap 3 Pull 2 or Wrap 2 Pull 1. A primary benefit of this rigging is the retention of the full strength of the webbing. Because so much load is taken by friction around the anchor, none is held by the bend, assuming you place the bend at the front of the anchor as pictured here. In this application, if you are my partner, I will forego the 2-step process. I will be willing to hang my life on it. We can use it if our intent is to retrieve the webbing. I prefer not to use it when it will be left behind for anyone else to see who might not have developed their own ability to discern. I don't want them to get the impression that a flat overhand is acceptable for fear they might use it in situations when it is absolutely not acceptable. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you think it will benefit others, please share it on your favorite social media. The best way to keep this old man motivated to produce more videos like this one, while I still can, will be to subscribe to my channel. Thanks.